Okay, so let's begin, everybody. Welcome. My name is Emilie, chef and coordinator here at the New York-Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital. I never get tired of saying that because I'm always excited to share recipes with all of you, and today's no different. So we're going to be making some fall soups and stews. It's, I think, really important to enjoy soups and stews in this weather and when it gets a little bit chilly. And not only because they're delicious and it's a great way to get lots of vegetables into your meal plan, but also because it's warming, so it kind of gets your digestive system, ready to enjoy whatever it is you're about to have, whether the meal is the full course or maybe there's a few courses after that. So not only is it's really warming for the digestive system, it's also, I find it very grounding. And for my friends out there who are very quick eaters and eat very, very quickly, it's hard to eat a hot bowl of soup fast. You really have to slow down. So it's an opportunity to slow down, get mindful with your food, enjoy something that's warming and grounding. And it's also hydrating. We don't really think about it, but there's a lot of liquid in soups. So it's very hydrating. And especially this time of year when things are starting to dry out, the leaves are crisping up and falling. There's a lot of air and winds, and especially in the fall time, right? All the leaves kind of whooshing around. That does kind of dry us out a little bit. So it's important to have, we usually think of hydration in relationship to the summer when it's really hot. And of course, it's important then too. It's always important, but in the fall time too, it's really good to make sure you're getting your beverages and your warm soups in. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the cooking. So welcome everyone. Alita is going to be moderating for us today. Forever grateful to Alita. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, which has already begun over there. So our first soup is going to be the 3 squash soup. And this is a beautiful squash called delicata. It has a shorter season than the other ones, so try to get your hands on it now. So you're going to start by slicing this really thinly. And you're going to notice I'm leaving the peel on. I'm leaving the seeds in. But I think that this all makes for excellent crunchy topping for the soup. So this is one of my favorite squashes because it requires little to no preparation. You're just gonna slice it really thinly, and you can use it in a soup like this, or what we're gonna do is we're gonna roast it, and this will be squash number 1. We're gonna roast it, and we're gonna have it sort of as like a crispy delicata squash chip on top of the soup. So it adds a little bit of crunch and depth and texture to this recipe. So I'm just going really carefully because, this is round and it likes to roll around. And I don't like vegetables that roll around because they roll and then my fingers can't quite catch them and it's difficult. So just go slowly with that. And you'll see you want to get your sheet pan ready. Get your oven preheated. Mine's already going. Squiggle down some oil there. And then we're gonna just put these on top. I like to spread them out so each one has its own little, I always say, its own little space on the dance floor. So it gets to do its thing. Okay. And as everybody's joining us here today, I'm sure you're all making delicious soups and stews already. I'd love to hear a little bit from everyone. What soups are you making? What stews have you tried? How are things going in your kitchen? Just so we can all connect and learn from one another, because it's really fun to hear from everyone and what they're doing. I'm going to try to get one more slice out of this. It's always the last slice that gets where you end up hurting yourself. So be very careful here. Okay, I got it. Last one. All right, so now everyone's got their space. Probably could space these out even more. Do a little oil on top, and we're going to pop this into the oven while we get everything else ready. I'm going to sprinkle some salt. And this is not only for artistry, but it's also for practicality. If you sprinkle from high, the salt disperses more evenly, and you can, instead of having little pockets of salt, you get the salt spread everywhere. All right, so we're going to pop this into the oven while we get everything else ready. Questions or comments about delicata squash? Has anybody tried it? Has anybody, and I'm going to start by taking apart the butternut squash as well, so we can get started with that. Does anyone want to share a little bit about their experience with delicata, if anyone's tried that? And I'm going to start by just taking off the top of the butternut and then peeling it. So I'm grabbing my vegetable peeler and peeling down along this beautiful bell shape.
So Chef Emilie, a couple of people have responded to your question for today. Josephine made escarole and cannellini bean soup for lunch today.
I love that. That's a great one. And that's a really quick one too, because you can pop open a can of beans, and escarole, because it's such a delicate green, it cooks down very quickly. And if you make that with like a good chicken broth or something like that, you can also make it vegetarian, of course. Super tasty. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
Yeah, a couple. Sue says that butternut squash soup is her favorite.
Ah!
So awesome. I commented as well. I made blended black eyed peas with carrots, onions, and potatoes. It's very, very good. Sue also said ginger carrot soup.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me of that, Sue. I haven't made that yet this season, and that's a really good one because with the ginger in there, it's super warming. Yeah, thank you.
Patricia says she loves delicata squash, and the seeds are very tasty when toasted.
Yes, another delicata aficionado.
And Marlene says she likes vegetarian borscht.
Vegetarian borscht. Okay, yeah. So that's borscht is made with beets, and I guess you just leave out the, that's pretty much how I make it too. I don't put any meat in my borscht. I actually, when you said that, I was like, is there a borscht that's not vegetarian?
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Because in my mind, but I guess traditionally it is made with some ground meat. Yeah, interesting.
Probably. So Marlene included Portuguese kale soup.
Oh, yes. I think we made that here once. It has like a little bit of cinnamon. Yeah, a long time ago. That's a good one.
Valerie says she loves lentil soup.
Nice.
Bettina has a question about the butternut. Is there a way to soften the butternut squash in the microwave?
Yeah, so you can grab a fork and poke it a few times, and you can put it in the microwave, and that'll help to soften it. I'm going to show you a trick for cutting this so it's a little bit easier than maybe what you're used to. So we've peeled it. Now I'm going to go, the bell is where the seeds are. So I'm going to go right sort of above that. And then it's really hard to push through. So you can kind of take the knife in, out, and go around, kind of scoring it around and around. And that'll kind of help you see it slid right through. Right, so that's one technique. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can also go with then now I have a flat surface. I feel a little bit better about that. You can also go with the banging technique where you bang your knife through the squash. And I'm actually not pushing at all. It sounds very effortful, but it's like I'm just letting the knife and gravity do the work. So that's another good technique to know about as well. And now we have these nice big flat surfaces. It's like, good. Okay. You can just push the knife right through. But definitely, if anyone has had success with that microwaving the squash technique, please feel free to share in the comments. I've done it once with spaghetti squash, and I poked it with a fork all over, and I microwaved it for it took about 10 minutes before it got nice and soft and cooked. But I think, but in that case, I was actually looking to fully cook the squash. So that worked well for the spaghetti squash. If you were doing a butternut and you just wanted to soften it so that you could cut through it, probably only would take a few minutes, don't you think, Alita?
Yes, probably.
All right. So I'm just chopping this up again using the knife itself to kind of weigh it down. And then each little half moon, now we've got these smaller and smaller pieces, can get cut into even smaller pieces. So it's just a bit of a process of breaking it down from something that feels really big and unwieldy to, okay, like this is more manageable, right? This is smaller. And then before you know it, you've got these nice small pieces that you can kind of just work your way through. Yeah. You can also buy butternut squash frozen. beautiful convenience, right? It's like you can buy butternut squash peeled, chopped, frozen. It works just as well. It's a little more expensive. Of course, you're not getting as much value. So it's nice and they don't sell, they don't sell frozen butternut squash at your farmer's market or your local farm, they sell the real thing. So it's good to know how to break it down. And the last thing I wanted to mention about the butternut squash is you can use different squashes instead for this recipe. You can use honey nut, which are the small little butternut squashes. And those are delicious. They're a little bit sweeter, I think. But the nice thing about them is because they're a little bit smaller, I don't know, I find them less intimidating. It's like they're cute. They're like cute little squashes, they can't hurt you. So the one thing I'll mention is I once tried to stack the butternut squash and cut through it and it slipped. So sometimes it works, but sometimes I've learned the hard way. The squash can get very slippery and you can end up hurting yourself. So be careful if you are planning to stack like I just did here. Any other questions or comments? We're almost through the squash.
Oh, yeah, there's a comment from Marlene. She says regarding the microwaving of the squash, of the butternut squash.
Oh yeah, please.
She says 5 minutes in the microwave.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Marlene. Yeah, I don't use my microwave much at home, so it's but it's a great thing to know about, especially, I'm feeling this in my arm and elbow. Like I'm feeling a little bit of like, okay, this is work, now that I'm chopping through all these small little pieces. This is really where the work is, I think. But it helps to have a very sharp knife, of course. That's always going to help. And some patience. So butternut squash in particular, look at this gorgeous orange color, right? This orange color indicates the expression of a specific antioxidant and phytonutrient known as beta carotene. Most of you have heard me talk about beta carotene. So it's responsible for the orange pigment in foods. Things like sweet potatoes have it, carrots have it, orange bell peppers have it. What else? Any other orange foods I'm missing? Oranges don't have it, which is kind of ironic. Oranges themselves don't have a high expression of beta carotene. It's more the vegetables that do. Oranges, of course, have other wonderful things that we won't, hold against them, that they don't have the beta carotene. But the beta carotene, of course, converts into the body as vitamin A and, has many important functions in our body, one of which is, of course, for eyesight. So that's where that old myth of like, eat lots of carrots for your eyes, that comes from that. Okay, so we've got our squash almost diced up here. And I wanted to use, the reason I called this a 3-squash soup is because I wanted to use one of our kabocha squashes from the garden, but they weren't quite ready yet. They were still and the way that you can tell when they're ready is that the stems kind of dry up a bit and they weren't really there yet. So we're gonna pretend this is a kabocha squash and we're just gonna make do with what we have, which is always the best thing in the kitchen. So if you're following along here, you need about 5 cups of the winter squash, peeled and cubed. So we're doing that. This is about 5 cups. So I probably have enough of this. I am going to show you how to work with the seeds, but I do want to get these in. And then we're going to add the carrot, onion, celery, and squash. We can put it all together and just let it cook for about, 5-10 minutes or so. So we'll start with the squash and get that in there with a little bit of oil. Any other questions? I'm smelling the delicata. It smells delicious.
There was some comments. So in terms of the orange vegetables, sweet potatoes.
Yes, definitely sweet potatoes. Yeah.
And somebody wanted to know, do you peel the butternut squash before putting it in the microwave? I'm waiting for.
No, I don't, but maybe you could. Yeah, I suppose you could. I don't know. I think you kind of need the skin around it. I'm just going to peel this carrot while we chat. I think you kind of need the skin around it to help kind of steam it, soften it. I don't know. I would feel like you would cook the flesh too much if you peeled it. It's kind of my intuition on that one.
I've never used the microwave So Teresa wants to know, could you use a food processor to cut the squash?
Oh, interesting. I have not tried that. A food processor to cut the squash. You mean just like put in big chunks of it, I guess, and see if it kind of breaks it up a bit? I have the feeling that wouldn't work very well. It's an interesting idea, but I don't know. Unless you have a different kind of food processor that I'm not aware of. I'm just going to start trimming this celery. Anything else?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. So you notice I added a few carrots in there. I'm adding some celery as well. So with celery, I like to split it right down the middle. So now it has sort of more of a flat surface to go on. And then same thing here. Sorry. Same thing here. You're just going to add a little celery dice. Just one stalk. I have made this soup without the celery, and it adds something. It really, I think there's a reason it's part of every, almost every soup recipe. You're always going to find a celery stalk at the base of it, behind it all. So there's something to it. A good tip for storing your celery, because when you buy a bunch of celery and you only use one stalk, and you think, what on earth do I do with the rest of my celery? You can, and this is one of the only times, and I'm going to start on my onion. This is one of the only times I will actually use tinfoil, is I will wrap the celery in tinfoil and keep it in the fridge, and it keeps for almost a month if you store it that way. So yeah, I will leave that up to you. I'm going to add oil because I don't think I did yet. On if you want to try that out, but it's pretty impressive. And then when the celery gets a little, a little tired, a little sad, and not so, celery-y, not so firm anymore. The celery's like, I'm celery. And then it kind of starts to peter out, right? After a time, you can put it in some really cold water. And this is a great trick too. And I'm just going to slice this onion up. Because the cold water will actually get it to firm up again. It'll kind of like perk up and be like, oh yeah, I remember, I'm supposed to be celery. So that's two tips for kind of extending the shelf life on your celery. And then the third tip, of course, is you could dice it all up, put it in a pot of boiling water for a minute or two to blanch it, strain it well, and then put it in your freezer and, flatten it out in a bag once it cools down, and definitely, keep it in your freezer. And anytime you need a handful or cup of diced celery, you've got that ready to go. All right, that's my little celery spiel. So we've got our carrot, onions, celery, butternut squash. I'm going to check on our squash in the oven because it smells really good. And this oven's a little bit funny sometimes, so I'm going to rotate it. Okay. And then we've got a couple other things going in here, some seasoning. So I have a beautiful cinnamon stick, star anise, this one, really pretty, some peppercorns, and 2 cloves. And we're gonna make a little bundle out of these. So you wanna get some cheesecloth. I had a pair of scissors. There they are. Of course, on the other side of the room, but I will get them. Okay. So you want to get your cheesecloth kind of laid out, and you're just going to make a little bundle, put the spices right in there. And I'm going to cut this here. We don't need this much for such a small amount. And you just want to make a little package so that nothing escapes. So I kind of gather up the ends like you're going on a picnic or something. And I'm going to trim the top, because again, we don't need that much fabric in here. I like to twist it, and then I actually use the fabric itself to tie it off. So some people use some twine or some, some kind of anything that can go in, for baking, or you could boil it or whatever. I just use the fabric itself. Tie off a knot. We're going to trim that. And this is going to go in. It's going to keep our little spices all together. So cute little package. Okay, and that's it. We're going to add that in. We're going to add some hot broth. I've got that over here, and I did make my own vegetable stock, and I want to walk you through that. Once you add the bundle in, be careful that you're not stirring things around too much because you don't want to disrupt the bundle. Put back some salt. And I think that's it. Did I forget anything? I think we're good. Good. Okay. Move the salt around, the oil. So everything's getting a little bit soft in here. The onions are starting to take on that softness. The squash smells so good. I think it's one of my favorite fall soups too. I think, who was it who said that? I think it was Sue. And here's our homemade vegetable stock. So you have instructions on how to make this on the very first page. I made extra because it's always great to have extra homemade vegetable stock. And then these are all of the goodies on the inside here. So I have carrots and turmeric and onions and celery. There's that celery again. You don't know what to do with your celery? Now you do. Add it into your stock. Peppercorn, bay leaves. What else did I put in here? I think I had the recipe here. So there's the fresh parsley, garlic. I also put a little bit of ground turmeric. So this is super anti-inflammatory. And yeah, a couple tomatoes went in. Yeah, you have the recipe for this. You can follow it. It's very, very simple. Strain everything out. I know this is the part that gets me whenever I'm making my own stock or broth is there's really nothing left in those vegetables. It's just like a fibery mess. So I know as tempting as it is to, maybe if you want to repurpose it, go for it. I'm not going to stop you, but I have to say there's not a lot in those veggies. They're all in this beautiful, magical mineral broth. So this is very mineral rich. Look at the color, right? You can see how different that is from the store-bought stuff. And taste it. Taste your stock and broth and see what you think. So I'm going to add enough just to cover the vegetables. I'm going to add that herb bundle. We're going to cover it up and set it in the back and just let that cook. Any questions about that?
Well, there's a couple of comments. Marlene states that in France, they can buy one stalk of celery at the outdoor markets and also in the supermarket.
That's amazing. Oh my God, I love that. Yeah, how cool.
Yes, that's very cool. So E says, guess it's the naturally cured meats. They have celery juice in it for the natural nitrates for that flavor.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. That's true.
And then
Karen, I guess, yeah.
Karen has a question. She says, for leftover celery, what's the benefit of blanching the celery before freezing it versus chopping it and freezing it?
Yeah, so I guess you could chop it and freeze it as well. I've done that. It just gets very like waterlogged when you just chop and freeze it, and it doesn't stay crunchy at all. Whereas if you blanch it, it can still retain like a little bit of crunch to it. But I guess if you're making soup, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's all going to get waterlogged and blended up anyway. So it kind of depends on what you're going to use it for. But sometimes I like to blanch it, freeze it, and then use it in like a chicken salad or something like that, where you do want that little bit of celery crunch. So that's the main difference. Yeah, good questions, everyone. Thank you. Are we ready for our next recipe?
Yes.
Okay, so if everyone wants to turn the page, we're going to make the cauliflower and coconut soup. And we're going to start by preparing our leek. This is a beautiful leek from our garden. I'm going to cut right down the middle. I feel like people shy away from leeks because they're a little bit more, maybe more involved than an onion to prepare. But they have such a beautiful, kind of sweet, delicate flavor that's really worth kind of checking out. It's worth checking out if you're not a big leeks person. I never used to use leeks, and then I learned more about them when I went to school, and now it's just like a leek love affair. I can't get enough of them. I want to put leeks in everything because the flavor is so lovely. So the best way to wash them is to get your little bucket of water here, put them in once they're chopped. And then the tricky part with leeks, of course, they like to grow where there's a lot of kind of mud and dirt, and the dirt gets trapped in those leaves, which are layered. So it's great to kind of break them apart, and the dirt will sink to the bottom and the leeks will float to the top. See how they're separating? Right? Okay, we can get our second pot on here. So I'm going to scoot this to the back so you can all see what we're doing up here. So that's the butternut squash recipe. It just went to the back. I'm going to pull this pot forward so we can get ready for the next one. So this one's pretty straightforward. Everything goes in. Leeks, cilantro, cauliflower, turmeric, salt for about 5 minutes. And then you're going to add, and the rice as well. And then a little bit further along, you'll add the coconut milk, the vegetable stock. You're done. It's very, very simple. These are both blended soups, but this one can be served. No, this one needs to be served blended. The butternut squash one can be served chunky if you prefer that. I like to blend it and it gets really creamy, and it's like eating a orange velvet soup. That would be a good name for it. Orange velvet soup. All right, so we're adding our leek, and I'm just kind of skimming the surface here, trying to gather up as many of the little pieces as possible. You could, of course, use a strainer and just pour and strain, but I like to lift out because sometimes when you put things through a strainer, the dirt just ends up back on top of it. So that's kind of like, oh, what did I wash that for? I didn't, need to start over again. So our leeks are in. Let's get some oil here. Oh, I wanted to use ghee for this one, just to introduce you to a different kind of fat. So ghee is clarified butter. So this will make the soup just a little bit like creamier. Of course, olive oil is, my number one in my heart and number one for your heart. So that would be a great choice too, but I just like to offer some variety. Now, let's work on our cauliflower. So this is our head of cauliflower. I like to put it face down, and then you go in at an angle, almost like if anyone's ever taken out the top of a tomato with a small knife, you kind of go at an angle. This is like a big version of that. So we're going to go in at an angle and cut away the core. So keep moving around, and then see how you end up with this kind of, right? This is what we scooped out. So that part's really tough. The leaves are really tough. I did have the audacity to try and roast cauliflower leaves, and it was okay. Just, it was a little chewy, but I always like to see how far these vegetables can go. So I'm going to slice this up fairly thinly, and we'll pop everything into the pot with the leek. And that's it for this one. Cauliflower cooks up fast. It's about 10, 15 minutes. We're going to add some curry powder. We're going to add some turmeric. It's going to have a beautiful golden color. And I do want to mention the cilantro, because not everybody likes cilantro. Not everybody eats cilantro. You can leave the cilantro out. It's okay. I will forgive you. It's delicious. It's really, really yummy. But if you're not a cilantro fan, you can leave it out. That's fine. Okay, so we've got our head of cauliflower ready. And I did rinse this before, before using it. I like to rinse everything. Peace of mind helps, right? Okay, so we'll put this in. So we've got our leek, we've got our cauliflower. We'll add our cilantro, our rice, our turmeric, our salt. I should note in the directions, I forgot to put the curry powder. So that goes in step 2 with the turmeric. So if everybody wants to write a little note to themselves, I can also, I'll also correct the recipe and just make that little note. I think the curry powder was an afterthought. I was like, oh, then what would it be with curry powder? So then I added it in. So there goes the turmeric.
I'm sorry. So Chef Emilie, you're saying in step number 2?
Yeah. In step number 2. Yeah.
It says curry powder.
Oh, it does. Oh, excellent. Well, very good.
Well,
I'm so glad.
It's there.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's not on mine. Maybe I have an older copy. Okay. So onwards and upwards. Then we're going to add the curry powder with our turmeric, our cauliflower, our leeks. Get some heat on that. And then we're using some basmati rice. This is uncooked, plain basmati rice, about 2 tablespoons. Now, I know that might seem a bit odd, but it's going to cook in the hot stock. It's actually the purpose of the rice, and this is a good trick for anyone to know about, is it adds thickness to your soups. So if you add 1 or 2 tablespoons of a dried basmati rice, you don't need a lot. It'll really help. It'll act kind of like a potato and give it a little bit of that creaminess without the potato flavor. And in this soup, it works really well. So we've got all of our vegetables in there. Let's check on our squash, because I do have a tendency to burn these little guys. Here they are. Oh, they smell so good. I'm gonna bring those over in a second just to show you what they look like. But I want to get some stock in here. And let's get our cilantro in there too. About 1/3 of a cup. It's not that much. It's not that much, right? It's not that much. Bundle it up. We're going to use the stems and everything in here. Okay, because this is going to get blended. I'm not really worried about these tough fibrous stems. The cauliflower is more tough and fibrous than cilantro stems. So that's about, that was a little more than 1/3 of a cup. I like cilantro. I can't help myself. Okay, let's add our stock and cover this up. Did I forget anything? I think we're all set, right?
All good.
All good. So in it goes. Again, my rule of thumb with these stocks and broths, I do have measurements on how many cups, but generally I just do, oh, this is boiling in the back, so I'm going to turn that down. Generally, I just do, a hair above the vegetable line. So unless I'm cooking like a soup with lentils or dried beans or anything like that absorb a ton of water, or pasta, then you might need to put a little bit more. But usually for these soups, just a little bit above the vegetable line is my rule of thumb. Any questions?
Yes, so there was a comment about the celery. So he says that blanching makes it less mushy when defrosted, which is what I have found as well.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
And Kathy wants to know, do you need to peel the outer layers of the leek first?
No, you don't need to. It depends on the leek. Like if they're papery and kind of dried out, then yeah, maybe get rid of those. But if you notice, I use the white parts and a little bit of the light green parts. All of the dark green parts, actually, I washed them and I threw them into the soup, the stock pot. It's not in the recipe, but it's a good way to use your leek tops, is you can put them in your vegetable stock too. Yeah.
And Anne says she doesn't think that there's a light under the cauliflower, so meaning
I didn't understand that. Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, she says that she doesn't think that you have fire under the cauliflower soup.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. It's actually, you know what? It's the dial is on, but it didn't light. So thank you, Anne. You saved our cauliflower soup. So observant. I'm very impressed. All right, so we're gonna turn these over. They got nice and golden on one side. Turn them over so they can crisp up a little on the other side. But these are pretty much done when they get golden and they're crispy and beautiful. Look at these delicata chips. It's really good. So I'm gonna put these back in, let them go for just another minute or so. All right, so fire is on, we're ready to go. Let's get ready with our third soup. So this is on the final page of your packets, and I'm just going to turn the dials down here while we get it ready. And I like this one. It's a very simple noodle soup, and you can of course add chicken to it to make it chicken noodle soup. You don't have to though. You can keep it veggie and put some tofu in. You could serve it with like a poached egg on top. It's really good, kind of mixed into the soup. But this is really the easiest one because everything goes into the pot with the vegetable broth. So you got your pot ready. Let's grab some of that broth. Put that in here. Okay. And then you're just gonna add your vegetables in. And this is like that cozy, like maybe if you're not feeling too well or you just need something that's a little, simple to put together. You're gonna add your peeled and chopped carrot. So put that in. We're gonna add some garbanzo beans. So these are also known as chickpeas. these ones, and here they are, drained and rinsed. Gonna cook those in there. Let's see, what else do we have in here? The garbanzo beans, the vegetable broth, a little bit of salt. Let's add some cabbage too. Now, I really, really like this recipe with Savoy cabbage because it just looks really beautiful in the soup. It's kind of like little ribbons of cabbage beauty. And look, a regular cabbage is good too. I'm not gonna insult our cabbage friends. But the Savoy is really nice and it looks really pretty. But I couldn't get my hands on one, so we're gonna use our humble cabbage. We're going to start by trim the bottom, cutting it in half. This is always the hardest part, getting through that core. And this recipe calls for about 4 cups. I'm making a smaller amount. I only did about 4 or 5 cups of the broth, so I'm just going to do a little bit less than the 4 cups. But I'm quartering it. And now that it's in quarters, you can just thinly slice the cabbage. Let's pop our noodles in there too, because they're going to need some time. Put our egg noodles in, thinly slice the cabbage. We're going to add this in, and this is it. You're almost done, right? This is like the simplest one. Now, I will say for this soup, I am requesting that you try making it the homemade stocker broth because it makes all the difference in this recipe if you use the homemade stuff, because there's not a lot of other things, going on in this. It's just the chickpeas and some veggies. You need that broth to give it a little bit of interest and depth. So that's my word to the wise on this one. All right, let's add our shredded cabbage. Mix that all together. I might need to add a little bit more of the broth because those noodles absorb a lot of liquid. Remember how I was talking about like if you're using a dried bean? Well, noodles too. So we'll add a little bit more to bring this up. And then we'll add a bit of the spinach at the end. You can use Swiss chard too. That's what we're going to use because that's what we have. And you're done. That's it for this one. It's very, very simple. It's light. It's like, it's like the kind of thing that I like to eat when I'm not feeling, super healthy or well. Simple foods, and everybody needs that once in a while, right? Everybody needs those comfort soups. So here's our glorious chard, and I'm going to slice this up for later. Any questions about this one? Pretty straightforward, right?
So there's a question from E. Sorry. Would these soups be used mainly as a side dish or a main meal?
Oh, good question. Okay, so I would say for the cauliflower and the butternut squash soups, I kind of use them as a side because there's no protein in them. It's mostly all, it is all veg. So they're more side soups. But this one, the simple noodle soup, it has the chickpeas in there, and then you also have the option of adding in some, old rotisserie chicken or something, not old, but like leftover rotisserie chicken, or a couple cubes of tofu or something if you want to bulk it up even more. So this one, I think I have it as like as a main soup because it's got more hearty chickpeas and stuff in it. Anything else? Any other questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, so this will be for our friend over here. Let's check on our butternut squash and see if it's tender. So you just want to cook it until the squash is tender. Usually it takes about 20 minutes or so. Let's see. So you can fish out a few cubes and see. I like to use either the back of my spoon and see if it presses, right? So see how it smushed beautifully against the spoon? So that's it. You're all done with this. It's a pretty quick soup once you get the squash kind of taken apart, So let's check on our cauliflower here. Oh, that smells really good. It's got this bright orange color from the turmeric and the curry. I think we're going to end up with 2 orange soups today. Sorry. It's a good color. It's a good color. We like it. Okay, so let's fish out our aromatic bundle. Here it is. All right, you don't want to blend this. Please remember to take this out. You don't want to blend that. You're going to ruin your whole soup. You'll be very upset. Okay, we're going to add some coconut milk to this. So let's pop I like to put the coconut milk right in the blender and blend it all together. You can use a handheld blender, or you can use the blender like we're using today. Of course, if you're using a Vitamix blender, be careful, because a lot of blenders don't tolerate heat. This one does, means you can blend hot stuff. A lot of blenders will create a funky little vacuum and explode, and you don't want that. So we'll do this in 2 batches. I'm going to slide this over here, put this here, and let's get set up for a successful blending experience. I'm going to pull this a little bit closer. Let's put the top on, always the most important part of blending. Put the top on, and then I always like to put a little, I call it my security blanket, put that on top, and start on low. Start on low so you don't, all of a sudden, right? And then you can go up a little higher. Right, blending, good. Go up a little higher. Until it's nice and sweet. Okay. I'm going to get a container here to pour this into so we can do the other batch. Any questions while I'm not blending and I can hear you?
Yeah, there's a comment from a question from Judy. She says she makes a cashew cream, pureed softened cashews, and adds it to the cauliflower soup, though not one with coconut. She doesn't, I guess, use coconut. That way it has a protein component. So she wants to know, how does that sound?
That sounds awesome, Judy. I love that idea. Certainly you could do that if you wanted to soften up some cashews and blend them in. You could also, an alternative to your method is to take the raw cashew nuts and cook them with the butternut squash and everything in there, and then just blend it all together. So you kind of do it all in one step. But yeah, certainly that's a great idea if you're avoiding the coconut milk for any health reasons, or just don't like coconut milk. I really like that. Thank you for sharing that. Can I blend once more?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to crank this up. This one doesn't have coconut milk, so we're going to add it in. All right, and we're done. So just so you all know, I turned the oven off when I put the squash back in because I didn't want to forget that it was in there. So it's been hanging out, but it's not cooking anymore. We're going to add some fresh lime juice. That really brightens this up. Oops, and it's almost time. Well, it is time, but we're going to end a few minutes over. So some fresh lime juice to kind of brighten up that flavor, and you're ready. Done with this one. So any questions about our butternut squash soup? Yeah.
Karen wants to know, is there a substitute for the coconut milk?
Yeah, so Karen, I really like what Judy suggested about doing it with like cashew milk instead, either homemade or store-bought. Yeah, I think that would make a really nice substitution. Oh, this looks so nice. This is almost like a butternut squash bisque. It's like that nice creamy consistency. Okay, and then I like to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, a follow-up question. Could you freeze coconut milk?
Can you freeze coconut milk? I think technically you can, but it gets a little, it changes the texture of it. Like it gets a little grainy and funky. So you might just have to, if you're going to work with it, you might have to use it in like a blended capacity. I don't know. What do you think, Alita? I think it's possible, but
yes, it's possible, but you're right. But I do blend it before using it, because otherwise it is very kind of gritty.
It gets gritty and grainy. It's very strange. Yeah. I think it's maybe the fat doesn't freeze very well in there. All right, everybody. So the squash soup, I like to serve it with a couple of these beautiful little, like squash little chips on the side, or kind of scattered in there, either or. And then let's check on our other soups. That one's done. We'll scoot that to the back. Let's add our handful of greens to the cabbage and simple noodle soup to get that finished off. That one will be done. And then the, oh my gosh, I just realized what I did. Did you all realize what I did? The butternut squash soup, what coconut milk was supposed to be for the cauliflower soup. The butternut squash soup was supposed to get regular milk. That's why in my head, I'm like, of course you can use a different milk because I usually make this with a different milk. So if you follow along the recipes, you'll notice that the coconut milk goes in the squash soup, and that the 3 squash soup has whole milk or cashew milk listed. I'm so sorry about that. That's my mistake. I guess that's what happens when you try to make 3 soups at once. It's like spinning plates. Oh my goodness. Well, it'll still be delicious either way. Highly recommended with any of the above. All right, let's blend up our cauliflower. This is getting nice and soft. So same thing here. You just want to make sure, I can kind of feel it with the spoon. Like you can see that these are getting really nice and soft. Let's add the milk. I have coconut milk here for this. That's the right application of our coconut milk today. Okay, and then we're going to blend all of that up. And I even think the lime juice was supposed to be for the cauliflower. I completely mixed them. Mixed them up. Oh my goodness. See, I'm out of practice with my soup season. I've got to get back on the soup train, get it going again. All right, so here's our cauliflower soup. And there's more cauliflower in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a little bit of the liquid out. Put a little bit more of the meat in. And then we'll blend this up. That is so funny. I haven't made a mistake like that in a long time. So this one, you want to make sure the rice is nice and soft. That's kind of the hardest thing in there is the rice and the cauliflower. And then we'll blend this. And I've got the coconut milk in here. I have another lime. I guess I could add some lime juice in there too. It's so funny. Okay. And we'll blend this up. So same thing, you want this to be nice and smooth. You can serve any of these, the butternut squash soup chunky. This one, I prefer it blended. With it unblended, but you're not going to get, the rice like adds that creaminess. You're not going to get that unless you blend it. Okay, so did I thoroughly confuse everybody, or did everyone follow? I think we're okay.
I think we're okay.
All right, so then this is our cauliflower soup. This one's a little bit thicker, I think. It's a nice texture, it's a beautiful color. It smells really, really nice. And I had a little too much liquid, so you can, dispose of that however you want to. And then the third soup is our noodle soup. So let's have a look. So this one's easy. You just want to cook it until the noodles are soft. Oh, it smells so good. It's like that super comfort food kind of soup, right? So let me bring this over. I think I'm out of bowls. Okay. So here you go. Here you can see all the good veg that's in there. I mean, just looking at that, you feel healthier, right? It's like if you're having a sick day or something like that, it's like you just have one of these soups and it really helps to kind of move things through. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me today in our little soup adventure. Try to add more soups in. Again, you can see how many vegetables and nutrients are getting packed into these meals. And it's a really easy way to just add more fiber and more phytonutrients to your daily life. So I hope you enjoy soup season, and we'll probably have another soups class. Maybe we'll do like chunky soups or something like that next time for people who don't like the pureed ones. I know there's a few of you out there. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Alita. Final questions or comments? Did I miss anything?
The question about, can you freeze these soups?
Oh yes, of course. Yes. I think I didn't mention that in the recipe. I usually mention if you can. Yes, they all, They all freeze well. The one thing I would say is if you make the noodle soup, make it without the noodles in it, freeze it, and then when you heat it up, put the noodles in. You may need to add a little more water or broth or something, but I just find the freshly cooked noodles are much better than the ones that have been frozen, but that's just my picky taste. So, all right. Thanks everyone. See you again soon. Bye.